I was just sitting in a normal HOA meeting when it all went south. The woman sitting across from me, let's just call her Karen, started calling me out, accusing me of being a fake veteran. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Imagine being in a room full of neighbors, some who barely know you, and having someone question your service to this country. Yeah, it stung. But here's the kicker. Karen had no idea who I actually was. I wasn't just any homeowner in that meeting. See, I'm the base commander at a local military installation. That's right. I've been leading soldiers for years, and yet, Karen thought she could just walk in and question my integrity without knowing a single thing about me. As she ranted on, I couldn't help but stay calm, playing it cool while my mind raced. What would happen next? Would I call her out right there, or should I just let the whole thing play out? Trust me, I was torn between staying composed and exposing her for the disrespect she was showing. But here's where the story really takes a turn. You won't believe what happens next. Stay tuned to find out how I handled the situation and what Karen didn't see coming. The thing about HOA meetings is that they can be pretty dull. People usually argue about property lines, landscaping, or if the new fence color is acceptable. But today, it was different. Karen, who, by the way, had a reputation for being the self-appointed enforcer of rules, decided to stir the pot. She'd been eyeing me for weeks, ever since I moved into the neighborhood, always with that judgmental stare. I never paid much attention, figuring she was just one of those types who liked to criticize anything that didn't fit her picture of what the community should be. But this time, things felt off. She kept talking about veterans, somehow linking her rant to my appearance. Maybe she thought the military background was something you could just look like you had, or maybe she assumed I was some guy playing pretend. Either way, she was making it clear she wasn't going to back down, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it. What really got under my skin was the way she dismissed anyone who didn't fit her narrow world view. She didn't know the first thing about military life, about the sacrifices that come with it, or the responsibility I carry every day as a base commander. She probably thought being in charge meant wearing a fancy title, but there's a lot more to it than that. As she kept talking, I could feel the tension building. I was done sitting there quietly, but how far should I go? The situation was about to take a turn I didn't expect. The room was growing quiet as Karen's voice grew louder. People around us were starting to shift uncomfortably, glancing at each other like they weren't sure what to do. Some of them knew I was military, maybe not the full story, but enough to have heard the rumors. But Karen didn't seem to care. She was in full swing now, going on about how real veterans should be able to prove themselves, like it was some kind of badge of honor you could flash in front of people. The worst part. She was looking straight at me as if she had me figured out, like I was just some poser she could easily call out in front of everyone. My heart was starting to race. It was frustrating, hearing someone so ignorant spout off about something they clearly knew nothing about. And it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the disrespect toward every service member out there who'd fought for this country, who had bled for it. I had to hold myself back from snapping. But then, I started to think about the people sitting in the room. A few of them were veterans too, and I could see the unease on their faces. They were feeling it too, the sting of her words. I realized then that this wasn't just an argument about me. It was a bigger issue. This was a battle for respect. I'd never been one to back down from something like that, but I had to choose my moment carefully. If I dropped the bombshell too soon, it might just make things worse. But Karen was digging herself deeper with every word. The more she spoke, the more she isolated herself from everyone else in that room. Still, she wasn't done yet. She looked at me with that smug smile, as if daring me to challenge her. I was itching to speak up, to tell her exactly who I was, but something told me I needed to wait. The tension was building to a point where it felt like the entire room was holding its breath, just waiting for the next move. Would I confront her now, or would I hold my cards until the time was right? Karen wasn't stopping. She was on a roll now, tossing around words like fraud and fake patriot without even pausing to think. The anger inside me was bubbling up, But I had to remind myself, this wasn't just about winning a petty argument. No, this was about standing up for everyone who'd been disrespected in a similar way, those who'd served this country and never asked for anything in return. The room felt heavier, like everyone was just waiting for the moment I would snap. I could see a few people shift uncomfortably in their seats, glancing around, unsure of how to react. Some looked at me, others at Karen. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for me to do something. But the tension in the air was thick, like we were all holding our breath. And then I realized something. It wasn't just Karen who was the problem. It was the fact that no one was speaking up. Everyone was letting her walk all over them, and it was feeding into her confidence. I could feel the eyes of the room pulling me, the pressure mounting. There was an undeniable moment when I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. But how would I make my move? If I called her out now, there was no going back. It wasn't just about confronting her. It was about owning the situation. I had to make her realize she had no clue who she was dealing with. As she turned to the group, making another sweeping statement about fake veterans and how they shouldn't be allowed to live in this community, I saw my opening. But before I could say anything, she caught my eye. There it was again, her smug, confident look, like she knew something I didn't. And in that moment, I knew she wasn't going to back down. This was it. The moment where everything would either blow up or take a turn I wasn't ready for. I took a deep breath, ready to step into the chaos, knowing that once I said what I was about to say, nothing would ever be the same again. The clock was ticking, and the room was hanging on every second. Just as I was about to speak, something unexpected happened. One of the other neighbors, someone I never really talked to, suddenly stood up. It wasn't like he was particularly outspoken. Actually, he was one of the quiet types who usually kept to himself. But today, he was different. His voice rang out across the room, and it immediately cut through Karen's tirade. "Karen, that's enough," he said, his tone firm but calm. The whole room seemed to freeze. Everyone turned to look at him, and I could feel the tension shift. Karen shot him a glare, clearly not used to being called out. "Excuse me," she snapped, clearly flustered by the interruption. But the man didn't back down. "You don't know him. You don't know what he's done or what he's been through. You're out of line." At first, I had no idea what was going on. Who was this guy? Why was he speaking up now? I'd never seen him take such a stand before, but as he locked eyes with Karen, I realized something. He wasn't just sticking up for me, he was sticking up for all the veterans she'd been disrespecting. And something about that, about seeing a quiet neighbor take a stand for something so much bigger than himself, made my chest tighten. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the community, about the respect we all owed each other. Karen looked stunned, her smug expression faltering. For a moment, there was an uncomfortable silence, but then the man took it a step further. "You want to talk about real veterans. You need to think about the people in this room who served, and not just him," he said, nodding toward me. "You have no idea who you're messing with, Karen, and I think it's time you learned." My heart was pounding now. This wasn't just escalating, it was becoming a full-blown confrontation. The room was on edge, everyone watching, waiting for the next move. What would Karen do now? Would she double down, or would she finally realize how far out of her league she was? This moment was spiraling in a direction I hadn't anticipated, and the stakes had never felt higher. I took another deep breath, knowing the worst was yet to come. The room was electric now, every pair of eyes locked on Karen, waiting for her to react. The tension was unbearable, but Karen didn't budge. She stood there, mouth agape, caught off guard by this unexpected defense. For a long moment, no one spoke. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. Finally, Karen broke the silence, her voice wavering slightly. I didn't mean anything by it," she stammered, but the apology lacked sincerity. She was clearly rattled, and I could see her trying to regain her usual confidence, but it wasn't working. The room had shifted. The audience that had been hesitant moments ago was no longer on her side. They were watching her, waiting for her to either own up to her mistake or double down. But just as Karen was about to say something else, I stood up. My voice was steady, louder than I intended, but it cut through the noise. "You want to talk about respect? Let me show you who I really am." The room fell silent again. Everyone was watching, waiting for me to reveal whatever I had been holding back. I looked Karen straight in the eyes. "I'm not just a veteran, Karen. I'm the base commander at the local military installation, and I've been leading soldiers for years. But more importantly, I've been serving my country every day, just like the men and women you're so quick to insult." There was a beat of stunned silence before the man who'd stood up for me earlier gave me a nod, like he knew I was about to drop the final truth bomb. The energy in the room had completely shifted. I could see people glancing at each other, some exchanging knowing looks. Karen's face turned pale. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected me to be anyone more than just the guy who lived down the street. But as the weight of my words hung in the air, something else happened. Karen, who was already on the defensive, looked like she was about to crumble. But then, out of nowhere, she laughed. It wasn't a triumphant laugh. It was a nervous, awkward laugh. I didn't know you were that important." Before I could respond, she did something completely unexpected. She apologized. Publicly, right there in front of everyone. It wasn't graceful, but it was an apology, a real one. And while it wasn't exactly the powerful moment I thought it would be, it was enough. People in the room started to speak up, some with their own stories of military service, others just expressing how tired they were of the division. For the first time in what felt like forever, the room wasn't divided. There was respect in the air, real respect, something that had been lacking for a long time. But as I sat back down, catching my breath from the whirlwind of emotions, there was one last thing that caught me completely off guard. The man who had spoken up for me earlier. He wasn't just some quiet neighbor after all. He was a retired general, and he'd been quietly watching the whole time, waiting for the right moment to make his move. It turned out the real surprise wasn't just Karen's apology. It was that we were all connected by a shared sense of respect, and sometimes you need a little push to remind people of that. As the meeting wrapped up, the mood in the room had shifted dramatically. The energy that had once been tense and hostile was now filled with an unusual sense of unity. Karen, for all her earlier arrogance, had been taken down a peg, and there was a sense of satisfaction in knowing that respect had won out over ignorance. People were talking to each other more openly, sharing stories about their experiences, military and civilian alike, the kind of conversations that had been missing for so long.